Yeah, you can switch on your video. I know. A warm good afternoon to all the participants. On behalf of Faculty of Architecture, Dr. MGR Educational Research Institute, Madurai, Chennai, myself, Architect Mohanapriya, Assistant Professor, Faculty of Architecture, takes privilege in welcoming you all. Karthik, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, 1 minute. Yeah, sorry, there's some technical issues. Sorry. Myself, Architect Mohanapriya, Assistant Professor, Faculty of Architecture, takes privilege in welcoming you all for our webinar series session 4 on cherishing cities, understanding the relevance of travel in architecture. Today, here we have with us our speaker for today's session, Karthik Nachiappan, who is an architect and urbanist graduated from the Architectural Association. He specializes on housing and urbanism, and his practice is established in Chennai in the name of Archivite Architecture. Archivite focuses on residential, commercial, CSR projects while establishing a slow base of urban research on the topics of public realm, urban pockets, informal utopia, and new urbanism. He is an active member of Atenor and Wizard and has also written articles and journals on the topics of informality and housing issues. Travel is his passion and has given a vast exposure and an insight for appreciating and comprehending architecture. Some of these suburban stations in Chennai was painted by his studio involving students and community. He's also actively involved in teaching as a guest lecturer dealing with topics on urban environments. He's here with us to share his experiences on travel and projects through his picture journal. Don't listen to what they say, go see is a little proverb that had inspired many people around the globe to travel. It is an important aspect in anyone's life. Being in the fraternity of architecture, travel is engraved within their lives as well. Many great architects have made traveling as a part of their lives. Here we come to say in today's session by our speaker on the essence of travel in understanding cities, architecture, nature, and more through his lens. We welcome you, Karthik. I request you to take over the session.
Thank you. I hope my voice is audible.
Yeah, it's fine.
And my screen as well.
Yes.
The screen is seen, right?
Yes, it's right now we have not shared your screen. We can see you.
Okay, fine. So
Yeah.
I'll just share my screen as well. Okay, now the screen is seen.
No, you have not shared your screen yet. 1 minute. Can you share your screen?
Yes.
Yeah. Now it's coming. 1 minute.
Fine.
Yes. Now it's fine. I request all the participants to mute your microphone.
Okay, so good afternoon to one and all present here, to all the participants, and I take this opportunity to heartily thank Dr. MGR University and the School of Architecture, MGR School of Architecture, the Dean, HOD, and all the teachers who have taken commitment to host this webinar series and take it to a great reach. So today I'm glad to share some of my experiences, and the topic I've chosen to talk about is about cherishing cities. So many of you would have traveled. So when we start traveling, we look at from a tourist point of view. So here I am here to talk and share my experiences of what many things a city shows us. So in simple terms, what as an architect, the understanding how travel is beneficial for us in terms of architecture and understanding urban environments. So this is what I'm going to focus on. So my presentation is going to get limited to just 2 cities of my own choice. And then I'll just talk about 2 more cities where I worked. And I'll close the presentation with some of the studio engagements that we are currently working on. So with traveling over 5 continents and 45 countries, I've seen and experienced and inferred a lot about and meaning about every community or every city that communicates to us. And of course, spaces are so beautiful when experienced, not just by seeing, but when experienced, spaces are so beautiful. As you could see in the map, the advancement of technology, travel has made such a way that travel is so easy. It has made it so easy that a tourist explores 5 countries in 6 days, maybe 14 countries in 15 days. So this is a usual map of travel for any tourist, right? And thanks to the borders of Europe, especially the European continent, where people can cross borders in a day to 2 countries. So it's more of a hop in and hop off experience. But this is not actually the way we see any country or any city. So for that, I have devised a small methodology for myself to travel. So I call this methodology as a collage method. So collage method is basically to use and experience all the hospitality reserves the city or the country offers to us. So in simple terms, I travel starting from a sleeping bag, probably to a youth hostel, to a backpackers hostel, to a farmhouse, and ends in a luxury hotel. And in a similar way, I take all modes of transportation, includes public transportation, trams, trains, by air, by water. So all means of transportation are taken into consideration, and all means of staying reserves are taken. So this is a way someone experiences a country or a city. What most of us tend to do is take up and end up in a 3-star hotel of our choice. And that usually, according to me, it restricts our travel. What happens is we stay in a 3-star hotel and we are tending to take their services of charge. Say, for example, we take up in the morning, they provide us the breakfast. So we miss out the cuisine in any country. Then probably they offer us a cab and they take us to what spots are close by, or probably the best of the spaces that they can explore in a day or two. So this is what usually travel offers us. But a collage method can make us explore different ways of understanding a city. And in short, in fact, it makes us comprehend what architecture and urban environment should be. So today, without delaying, I'm just going to take you to the first city. It's more of a photographic tour. So some of the best pictures I have collated to showcase you. So with the time restrictions concerned, so I'm just taking you through a quick tour of what I have learned. So without delaying, the first country that I'm going to talk today is Netherlands. And I guess most of you to have been to this beautiful city of Amsterdam. So Amsterdam has a lot to offer us. And the moment you get out of the station, this is the first picture you see. The moment you get out, unless and until you travel by an airplane, you get to Amsterdam by train, this is the first thing you see. It's a beautiful Gothic Renaissance revival architecture that the city offers you at the bank end. City is full of water. So once we get down, this is the first spot on we see. And this facade with the Pantone color, large windows, spires. So it gives us a memory or nostalgia of what Gothic and what mid-century Dutch architecture was all about. Then straight away from the station, we see this beautiful tram. So there are many European and many cities that offer tram services. And one of the best tram-friendly services that I have taken is in Amsterdam. Before we explore, Amsterdam is a city that you can actually reach by foot. So the first thing you need to get is a map of it. So especially as an urban planner, it is most informative to get a map to explore a city, or as a tourist as such. So once you get the map of the city, this tram takes you to entire place or entire districts in a slow motion so that you can experience different cultures. You can experience different buildings from mid-century Dutch architecture to modern and contemporary buildings. So it's a slow transition from the railway station to the central districts. It shows you diverse environments. And more interestingly, this picture, for someone who just sees this picture, they understand this as a water taxi station, right? So for general person to look at this image, this is a water bus station, a mode of transport in water. But as an urban planner, we try to understand this is a way of complicated intermodal transit system that binds or weaves together different modes of transportation. So just a quick get through. So you can see a water taxi station there. And right in front, you can see an M board, which is the metro station. You could see the central railway station. There is a bus stop over there. So which means that you have many modes of public transportation all bind together in a single place. And you also have a bicycle station close to it and a tram station. So which means that 6 modes of transportation are intercollated in one single place. What more a city could offer for anyone to get you around the city? So this is one interesting thing, the intermodal transit system that I observe what Amsterdam gives us. On being to Amsterdam, you would definitely get engulfed into this bicycle culture. Wherever you go, you see this bicycle. It is so beautiful to see so much sustainable transport systems within, and many people actively use the cycle. And there is also a fact stating that for around 440,000 families, there are around 850,000 bicycles, which means that on an average, for every household, there are 2 bikes. In simple words, every person has a bicycle in Amsterdam. So interesting to get into this culture of bicycle. So more than by foot, bicycle gives you a lot more opportunities to travel within the city. And of course, you can also see this view of multi-tiered bicycle parking. In many developing countries and contexts, we see multi-level car parking. So this is more into a bicycle culture. And sometimes when I look at this image, I keep on wondering in our fraternity, especially in developing countries, in India as well, we have a lot of historic cities, a lot of planned cities. Why do we not have such a kind of model experience? This is not only for architects or planners, but this is more for anyone to look at a city. This beautiful scaled model gives you an idea of what a city is, what kind of infrastructure the city has, what are the drainage patterns, how the river flows, and a lot of different things. What are the unique buildings there? What is the density over there? So before, let's not get into a technical detail, but still this map or this model, scaled model, is so beautiful for someone to understand the city's morphology and bird's eye view in short. So it's very, so I keep on wondering why we have a lot of potential in many developing cities, but we do not produce these kinds of models for someone to understand a city. And these models are kept in the city council itself for public view. And one can never miss these kinds of buildings in Amsterdam, especially in many Central Europe, especially after the Renaissance architecture. More than 16th and 17th century buildings follow this typology, a live-work typology. So this is a beautiful canal picture where I took. Canals is actually living in Amsterdam. It is a city of canals. If you can, even today, when you see a Google map of Amsterdam, you see water, water, water everywhere. So this is one such interesting picture. Though the height restrictions are to a similar scale, you could see in the front facade, the picture towards the right, that shows you a group of retail buildings like cafes, pubs, and things like that in the ground floor, and you have residential rental living on the above floor. This is actually a readapted typology from the previous days of Victorian houses, where they used to have the work or shops in the ground floor. They used to live in the first floor, and the topmost attic usually has the workspace because usually the workshops or workspaces need more direct sunlight. So the top floor usually has the workspace. So that typology is being readapted in modern ways. And the picture towards the left shows you a beautiful view of a canal, and especially those arched colonnades you could see towards the bottom are basically the entrances to the warehouse. So this is where people used to stock their goods, especially coming from the sea waters. It gets into the canal system and gets to individual parts of the house. And you can also see a lot of boat parking areas close by. So this is how Amsterdam is. And not to forget, the picture towards the left is a beautiful way that the city municipality takes into consideration the smallest detail, nothing but to feel secure in every place. So because of a lot of canals, there were a lot of underpasses and overpasses that were created, which means that there are a lot of residual spaces left. So even for a single citizen not to feel insecure about the environment, the city council has lit most of the spaces and made it more artistic so that everyone can go through and walk through all the environments. And the picture towards the right is still close to my heart, because in urban planning, we used to say that most of the campus and master plans can adhere to what the city offers us. So we know that the city of Amsterdam offers a lot of canals and bridges. So if you could just look at the picture towards your right, you have a beautiful building towards the right and a street towards your beautiful building towards the left and street towards the right, and it's connected by a bridge, and you can see a small stream of water that is running below. It is nothing but an architectural or urban representation of what the city's morphology is about. So they have taken into consideration the inferences what city planning is, and they have incorporated into master planning or campus planning like this. So this was a picture taken in the Central University of Amsterdam, a very nice way of representing what cities morphology and urban planning is all about. So when we talk about historic districts, Amsterdam not only restricts itself to only presenting historic buildings, but a lot of eye-catching, astounding landmarks are there around it, especially along the Dutch waters. So one could never miss at the rear side of the station this Eiffel Institute created by the Austrian architects Deleuze and Meisel. This is more of a white building that opens its mouth to engulf the Dutch waters. It's so beautiful expression. There are a lot of images. I propose to choose this and show this because it is a beautiful expression of how a building responds to its waterfront. A nice balcony that slows down with a ramp towards the water. The building has a lot of connection towards its environment, its surroundings. And just on the other side of Eastern Docklands, which was considered to be a more deprived area, it has started to revitalize. So urban planning in Amsterdam after 2000 had a lot of change, and a lot of eastern part of Docklands were revitalized. So this building was striking for me to just walk through and see what this building is about. So this is nothing but a Nemo building designed. It's kind of an exhibition, a pavilion building designed by Renzo Piano. So this Nemo building created more curiosity because in this view, I could just see one part which curves down to the other side, but I couldn't see what is happening on the other side. So that made me curious to walk around and get to the front part of the building where I could see this piece of building interacts with the surroundings and also has a lot of connectivity to the next building. And I could see a lot of flags on top. So again, I was more curious to walk down and see this. So to my surprise, I could see something happening on the top in the terrace. So then I just gathered some information from the nearby public, and I was shocked to realize this place was actually an open free exhibition space. So the city already had taken plans to revitalize the Eastern Dockland area, which means that the area is not used by the entire public or tourists. So what could be done to attract people was the thing going on. So they just made this place an open free exhibit. And of course, it is a city of culture. It is a city of a lot of artists. So it invited a lot of people to come and exhibit their places. And eventually the space became crowded, which means that the Eastern Docklands has slowly started to revitalize. So isn't it really interesting how a city could make use of a building to make it public, where most of our countries face a lot of buildings to be privatized and closed. A city which offers a lot of buildings to be public in nature and allows all the participants to have a free exhibit space. Being in Amsterdam, one can never forget being in this park called as Wondel Park. It is, one can think, it is a simple park, right? Why should someone show this as an image as a travel person? Because every city has its own park. But the unique thing about this park is every city builds and maintains their parks. But unlike Wondel Park, in around 140 years back, in around 1864, the citizens, the residents around this park gathered around 120 acres of land, revitalized this, developed into a summer park. So which means that the entire district was maintained by the people or the residents of the neighborhood itself. So this shows that how people are more community focused. You need not depend. All you need is a community support. You need not have people you need not have the city government to fund on this. So the city government was just approving it, but the people themselves took the initiative to revitalize this park and use it. And for over 100 years, it was maintained by the people. And later in 1970s and 1980s, the city municipality took over. So as an urban planner, I was more curious to find, because Amsterdam is a city that edges with water, which means a city cannot grow beyond one particular border. So I was more curious to understand how floating houses or what kind of city is created in waters beyond the edge line. So then I was more curious to walk around this interesting district called as IJ Borg or Iberg, which is located in a lake called as Niemeyer, which is one of the largest lake Amsterdam city has got. So they reclaimed the lands, they made landfills, they put millions of tons of sand to create a landfilled area where the houses were built. But one thing that they didn't forget was to still have this canal based treatment. So they still have a streetscape respecting the water. It is a city that celebrates water. So they didn't completely reclaim the land. Wherever they wanted, they reclaimed, and they still maintained the streetscape of historic Amsterdam. The only difference was it had more contemporary buildings in nature. It had more prefabricated buildings. But even though the district is new, housing has to be for all, right? As a city, they are more obliged to give housing to all the people, may it be a lower middle income group or even an above high income group. So the importance of social housing was seen in the master plan of this new island, where social housing were also created, and this almost respected to the previous social housing in the historic district. So you could see different contrasts in this island. But one thing we would never forget is a urban experience. It's a rural urban experience. In the city, this house had a chimney. It had a roof that was supported by processed reeds. So these kinds of buildings gave us a more than a suburban. It gave us a rural feel within the city. And not to forget and mention this, these buildings in the street. The buildings in the street had unique things in nature. So one can imagine what unique things could be in this building. It's a normal apartment or a loft kind of building, which is 3 or 4 story. What is unique here? Of course, the unique thing in this building is about the policy that they maintain. Amsterdam is so creative in expressing housing policies. So here in this island, the height restriction. So for people to understand that every housing has a particular standard to follow in terms of setbacks, in terms of height, in terms of floor area ratios, etc. So similarly, they had a mutual height restriction. So the heights were more or less limited, but they still had one more rule of adhering to 20% open space. Up to 20% open space has to be maintained. So these architects creatively express the 20% open space in the facade without leaving a setback, so that the setback becomes part of the building. So interesting ways a lot of people deal with policies. And to know, Amsterdam City Councils also accept this. The policy only states to leave open space, but it didn't tell where, right? So of course it is right. So these are some quite interesting buildings that gave us good opportunity to know what the housing policies in those countries were. So this is the front part of the building where I just took some time to take pictures. But just to close with the city, I just want to share some takeaways from Amsterdam that has given me. So first is, as a city, they are celebrating water. Water is the most important resource they have. So they are celebrating water with respect to giving buildings, giving landmarks, or maybe they are retaining the water as such. Though it is not in full use now for transportation, but they still celebrate water. Unique policy experimentation in terms of housing, urban planning, and master planning. There is a lot of mixed use and diversity. Unlike many countries where if it is a housing district, it has to be only housing. No, they have a lot of variety. There is a lot of mixed use that is created. They encourage sustainable transits. There were a lot of electrical vehicles at that time when we went. And of course, there were bicycles that were promoted. A lot of public transport was encouraged. For a city to flourish, all of us have to start and use public transport. And the public transport infrastructure has to be maintained in such a way that it encourages people to use it. Every inch of space was utilized. Not even the dungeons were left. Every inch of space, and that too for public utility. So including the buildings. Buildings open up itself for public use. And of course, it had astounding landmarks. I showed you 1 or 2 of the landmarks that with so many buildings. A lot of Dutch architects have experimented of beautiful buildings that the city can offer for us to view. So the next country that I'm going to talk about is Greece. So when I say Greece, most of the people get to the era of the Greek Empire, or probably many architects would understand Greece as Acropolis in Athens. So, and a lot of people understand Greece is a country which has history. So these are the things that comes to one's mind. But I also happen to look at a lot of nature within Greece. I also happened to look at a lot of contemporary things that are coming in Greece that also corresponded to the historic nature of the entire city. So the city that I visited first was Athens, but Athens is not the only city to visit. There are so many islands that I'll also show you in the later part of the slide. The picture towards your right is basically the Happy Train. So the Happy Train takes you everywhere around the city, especially to the historic districts and the landmark buildings. So you hop into the train, you will get a view of all the historic buildings. So before I'm not going to much focus on the Acropolis of Athens because most of you know what it is. But just before the foothills of Acropolis in Athens, you got this splendid Corinthian columned structure. So it's basically the temple of Olympion in the Hadrian Arch. So in the history, all of us know Hadrian was a great conqueror and emperor. So Hadrian had its arch placed just before the temple of Olympion because it connects the old city of Acropolis directly to the new districts that this emperor built. So Hadrian built new district with a lot of temples and a lot of public spaces. That this arch is the bifurcation or a place of boundary between the two, or the place that connects both. So you could see effective use of Corinthian arches in between. And towards your right is Temple of Olympian. The Corinthian arch, the Corinthian capital is nothing, but you could see a lot of flower capital kinds at the top of the column, which supports all the beams. So those are basically technically called as Corinthian capitals. So Temple of Olympian was built as a place of worship for Olympian Zeus. So all of us know it. So originally there were around 100 and more than 100 columns. To be precise, it was 104 columns. And now we have only 15 columns that are standing still intact, supporting few beams. So it is also said that, interestingly, this place of worship had the statue of Zeus made of a material called as chrysoelephantine. So chrysoelephantine is basically a mix of gold and ivory. So, in modern days, we don't know what actually happened to this statue, but it is said that it had this chrysoelephantine statue. One could never miss this district of Plaka. Personally, I enjoyed walking through this colorful district, or probably a beautiful district of Plaka. Usually, when people who have been to Athens, you usually take up the end point of Acropolis Hill and you walk down where you have a lot of souvenir shops, you have restaurants, cafes, and you just walk down to the main road. But when you just go deep inside the district of Plaka, it has a lot of things to offer you. You have pretty cobbled streets, almost equivalent to the Petite France in Strasbourg or Colmar. It has beautiful colored buildings. It has vintage lights. It had a lot of iron balustrades. It has different mix and match of colors. It had narrow, winding cul-de-sacs. All these offer, and it also had a lot of sidewalk cafes. It had beautiful hidden cuisines. And of course, the contour itself was up and down, which encouraged a lot of steps here and there. So, and one thing not to forget was anywhere you walk down inside the district, end of the street, you will see the Acropolis Hill. So you could see the top two pictures, which shows at the end, you see the Acropolis Hill. So every inch of the street corresponds to what Acropolis was. So we know that in Athens, Acropolis Hill was the major focal point. So these districts give you winding street and experiences that takes you to the divine hill. So it was so beautiful for someone to walk down into these streets, and it's a must for any urban planner to understand what self-shading in streets is about, what a streetscape is, what character streets have, and how private residents engulf and interact with each other. So there were many takeaways in this district as such. And I would call this stadium as a white marble delight. So for many people who might not have had an understanding of this, many people know Colosseum in Rome or Theatre of Epidaurus in Athens, but this is called as Panathinaike Stadium, where Herodotus Atticus built this around 2000 years before, and it was completely made of Pentelic marble. So you know that Greece, and especially the city of Athens, has a lot of historic structures that other to marble, completely marble, and some of limestone. So here, this stadium is completely built of white marble, Pentelic marble, and the source of the marble was taken from a nearby site. So the location was captured in such a way that it is easy to access all the resources from such. And and interesting information to share is that the first ever modern Olympics that we know today happened here in 1896. So when you just go through the galleries in Google of 1896 Olympics, you can see the views of this stadium. So the first ever Olympics was happened in this, and this takes the privilege of hosting the first Olympics. And of course, the architecture of it, it's more white marble, it's ashlar masonry. You can see two tiers, and there are some steps taking you to different tiers. And this is more of a Greek architectural type, dressed stone masonry. And of course, you can see the number of stands or number of tiers are being written in blue color. It's basically azul. Again, that is a material that is available from a nearby local source. So basically, the architecture was splitting the entire tires into two. So there is one aisle running in the 23rd row. It splits the tires into two. And what you can see in the right image, you see a staircase that goes upright. So there are totally 18 different staircases similar to this. So which means that there are total of 30 stands in this entire stadium. The 30 stands capacity 2000 years before was to host 50,000 people. That was quintessential in number. And of course, when talking about Greek and Roman people, we cannot afford to forget the social pyramid they created, from the king, queen to the noble, priest, still slaves. So of course, even the seats were designed in such a way. You could see a lion-shaped leg with a floral thing that is going on, and you can see a royal armrest. So you can see the seats are distinct from the others. So there were different seats like this, even for people who come from other countries. So the princess who come from the other countries had designated seats like this, and above them were nobles, and then priests, and then it goes on. So based on the social hierarchy, the stands were organized. So again, architecture and social thing goes hand in hand. The picture towards the right is basically called as tunnel of sacrifices. So just below these stands, you have 12 different entrances that takes you to a tunnel structure. So it is said in history that all the players who used to come and use the stadium, especially the players, their spouses used to go inside in the tunnel for to offer some sacrifices to the Greek goddess of Athena. So this sacrifice in terms, so they believe that it will lead to the victory. And interestingly, the first ever olive crown was also given at this stadium. When talking about Greece, one can never forget how Greece celebrated architecture, and not only architecture, how they celebrated female worship as well. Of course, everyone knows goddess of Athena was the major deity in Greece, but still, these are called as Caryatids in the porch of Erection. So this is one structure in the Acropolis hill just left to Parthenon temple. So these are basically, in Greek mythology, it is said that Caryaids are a group of ecstatic dancing ladies. So these ladies do an exotic kind of dance performance with a reed basket on their head. So this is the symbolism in Greek mythology. So now here the architecture represents a similar thing. It's more of a woman on top supporting the beam, so supporting the capital with something. So it is more or less looking like a reed basket, right? So you can see how Greeks were more fine-tuned towards architecture, proportion, mathematics, and of course, celebrating female figures. So these are beautiful porch that is created, and it's called as Caryatids. And this expression of divine worship of female was also expressed in terms of architecture. So, looking at one side of history, we can never forget what contemporary things offered in Athens as well. So, this was this museum, new Acropolis Museum designed by architect Bernard Schumi. So, I have been to a lot of museums which just shows a sequence of things that goes from one to another. So, it might be sequence in terms of archaeological dates, or maybe in terms of civilization. So there are a lot of museums that only offer a sequence of spaces, but this museum really offers an experience, because museums are things that make you close to what you see, right? Especially in Indian context, there are a lot of museums that do not allow us to interact with what the artifacts are, because we might vandalize it, we might touch it, we might screw it up. So that is the things that are going on in many developing contexts. So usually they keep the artifact, or they keep the ancient caves, and they close it. They close it for the user's view, or they fence it off. But this building, this architecture was beautifully expressed while a person actually walks through they experience it. So the next image will clearly show you how that experience is. So the one towards the left, you can see a picture of a cascading step.
Karthi, sorry to interrupt. Can you remove that blue highlight in between?
Actually, that is not.
Because I'm not able to erase it. Just look at the annotations. Press the eraser tool and try to erase it. No?
Okay, how do I?
If possible.
Okay, now is it fine?
Yeah. Please, thank you.
Is there any way you can just lock the annotations? It would be better.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah,
Fine.
sure.
Oh, thank you. So the picture towards the left actually shows a cascading steps that marks the entry to the museum. You could see some tall, gigantic pillars that are kept. So it is very carefully planned that it doesn't obstruct the historic site. So just next to Acropolis, you see layers of history. So this history is being surrounded by this museum. The museum itself is an experience. Without disturbing the history, you get close to it. As you could see, a lot of people. So I just took it from the entry of the museum. So you could see no one can vandalize it, but still they can experience the spaces. And a lot of glass floors were created so that you can also walk on top of it, yet maintain or establish a connection with the historic site. So such a beautiful museum, carefully planned so that a user enters and experiences it. It's one of its kind in the world, experiential museum. And the picture towards my right is the most memorable one that I have ever taken in front of Parthenon Temple. All of us know it's more of, most of the architects know that it's a kind of a peripheral octa style building. And it's more of Ionic front, Ionic columns. So architecture of Greece was celebrated in terms of the capitals and the columns, Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian. So this is more of 8 columns in the front and 17 in the side. So the temple has a beautiful architecture of it. So by the time I went, there was restorations that was going on. But anyway, this place gave me a kind of nostalgic appearance, or this place set me back 2000 years. So you can just feel the atmosphere that you are actually living in Parthenon. So that's a beautiful conserved and one of the epic landmarks in Greece, to be known. This is the view from historic Acropolis. So just, of course, when a new building comes up, it has to correspond, it has to extend its view towards the main temple. So you could see the hill of Acropolis right next to it. So this is from the topmost terrace, a picture taken from it. So going to the next place, so you have all of us should have heard about the Minoan and Mycenaean civilization. So I was more curious to explore what these civilizations offer. So when I researched, I got a group of islands in the Aegean Sea. So when you look at the map, these are some of the southeastern islands that exist just right below Athens and in between Alexandria of Egypt and Greece. So you could see this beautiful group of Cyclades in the Aegean Sea that offers you a lot more things to go and experience. So this is one such experience of an active volcano in the municipality of Tira. So imagine that gives you a 5-dimensional experience of earthly vibrations, and you can actually gain the heat there. So you're walking on top of an active volcano. Such a beautiful experience nature gives us. And lastly, the volcano erupted in around 1953, and the status of the volcano, interestingly, is active, which means that it can erupt anytime. So when you just walk around this entire island, you just feel the vibrations, earthly vibrations. And not to forget this experience in New Camine, that is, once you get down and take a ferry, you go to the next part of an active volcano area. This is called as thermal springs in New Camine, where imagine you're just asked to push off to the waters. The waters are as shallow as 4 feet and kind of quite deep in some terms of up to 20 meters. But you're just literally pushed off the boat. So this was a picture taken before I was pushed off. And it's a beautiful experience to stand in the thermal waters. And eventually you will get dried soon because the climatic conditions favors more easy drying. So at the outset of all these trips, finally I came to a place, or most commonly what we call as Santorini. Many of the pictures or many of Indian movies show this beautiful place of Santorini. Santorini is set in the municipality of Tira, and the city was called as Oya. Oya is very famous for its sunset, which I will show in the last slide. So you can, on the left, you can see some cinematic streets of Oya. Most of what you see in the right were the late 20th century interventions that were colored in different means. But what exactly the originality was blue and white in color. So the cinematic streets of Oya offers beautiful things to look at, cobbled streets. Even the landscape was more contoured and no edge was cut. Everything was utilized. So it's more sustainable way of using every city. So these cities, these group of islands were actually built by the seafarers, by the people, by the marine people themselves. So the architecture ensemble also takes into consideration what they wanted. So you could see this entire city, which is built in terms of dwarf houses. You could see blue colored domes. You could see blue doors, and blue and whites are the combination of this historic city. So when this was discovered, it was more of a so the reason behind the city to be developed was the maritime people who spend most of their lives in the ships wanted an environment almost resembling the ships. So most of the ships will have small windows, like circle windows, that overlook, that push you towards the view of sea. And the waters in the marine life are mostly green, and the skies are blue and white. So this is what a marine life is all about, right? Whites and blues, and small doors, small windows. So basically, the houses corresponded to what the seafarers wanted. So they made this entire city in the calderas, in the cliffs. They made it rock cut. They made it like caves. They made whatever niche was possible, and they crafted. Now, I wouldn't say it is created. It's more crafted city by the mariners. So we could just never imagine a city like this. And a similar city is also there in Antalya in Turkey, called as Cappadocia. And at the outset, one can never miss this picture of the windmill, because many movies show this. So at the end of this, you will see a lot of you can see wooden linear sledges connected with ties, and it's a more of traditional windmill that is still in present day it is used. You could see a small window there and a thatched roof. So these at the end of these settlements, the end of it is these picturesque windmills that you would see. You can never miss a windmill in these settlements. And these narrow streets also helps you understand how the planning of it has made self-shaded streets. So taking into consideration the orientation and the sun path, they have organized the streets and the narrow alleys so that most of the streets are self-shaded by themselves. And in the era where we are social distancing, what we call as social distancing in apartments and things like that, we come across each other or we bump into each other visually. But this beautiful city has crafted a kind of physical and social distancing, yet maintaining a kind of good visual communication with many people. So you can see the balconies of different houses that are interconnected. It is so lovely to see in real how many people interact with themselves in these cliff areas without even moving to the next place. And I think probably it is practically easier to transcend from one house to another through the balconies rather going by roads. It's much more easier. So this was one good picture that it was captured. Now most of the houses are being now converted into hotels, and it's available for you to stay. So some of these scenic houses can actually be rented to stay. And last but not the least, one goes to Oya just to see this beautiful sunset. At the top of the mountain, you get a glimpse of what nature has at its best to offer. That is a group of islands in the sea, pristine blue waters. You can see a kind of stairway that leads you to the top of the mountain from the bottom base, where you can see some boats. So literally walking up the hill is actually a tedious process, but it is still worth to take a walk up the hill so that you can experience different courtyard houses. All I had shown is just a limitation of the island, but the architecture of every house is unique. The courtyards that it offers, the self-shading techniques, the streetscapes, everything is so beautiful that has to be experienced by walk. But people who cannot walk, there were also mules or horses that takes you up the hill. And this was a picture taken from one of the balconies I stayed from the courtyard I stayed. So you can see the picturesque water and few people enjoying the sunset. So some of the takeaways that I took away when I just left was a country so willing to preserve its heritage, its legacy for 2,500 years, so that even today someone can feel that history. So that is so astounding for someone to be there. most of the climates, especially it's more of a hot climate. So how climate-based settlements were organized, and especially using natural resources like cliffs, they have carved out into these beautiful settlements. Nothing was using white marble, using limestone. So all the natural resources were plentifully available, and they used it without taking any other resource. And you can also go through a transition of time. So you can see how these 2000 years were crafted. 2000 years of history in Greece is still understood. Streetscapes were beautiful to offer, and how human interactions happen. And of course, lastly, you feel very close to the nature in city. And the next experience I want to share with you is the South American experience. So though I'm restricting the next two experiences to a workshop that I was there. So I worked with the city government, and so I just collated some of the pictures. But something that inspired me to go to South America was this building. And one of my inspirations was architect Oscar Niemeyer. So one of his beautiful building, Museum of Contemporary Arts in Niterói. It's in a neighborhood called as Niterói. So where you could see this floating bowl. The architecture is very simple, that offers a beauty to the city. So it is like a floating bowl that is just supported by a slender pillar, like our L&T building over here. So it has a wide panoramic view of glass that offers or extends your view towards the sea. You can see a slow winding staircase or a ramp that takes you to the above level of the. So the museum is not in the ground floor. It is just elevated. It is just a kind of floating bowl in the water. And the transition even in the ramp is more smoother, more smaller. And in terms of the flooring, they've used a kind of red pattern or red oxide of flooring. So it's more close to nature. It's more of a beautiful bowl that floats in water. So this experience and this building and this architect actually inspired me to go to the city. And one can never forget. So if you are in Rio de Janeiro, so the city I'm talking about is Rio de Janeiro. So Rio de Janeiro, if someone is there, one can never forget this cathedral. So when we talk about cathedrals, all that comes to our mind is a tall structure, is a kind of plus Greek and Latin cross, some white building. It's more tall with spires, Gothic buttresses, stained glass windows, round windows, rose windows. So these are something that comes to our mind when we say it is a church or a cathedral. But something wow that happens over here. This is a cathedral. This is the Cathedral of Saint Sebastian, right in the center of the city, central district, next to the district of Lapa, designed by architect Edgar Concesa. So what he has done is he has recreated the stepped civilization of Mayan inferences. So all of us know the Mayan pyramids were stepped, right? So he has recreated this entire structure inspired from Mayan pyramids, and you can see some cascading windows, cascading grooves from top to the bottom. And we can also say that modernism was at its peak at this time. So you can see the resultant of modernism at its peak, that even a church cathedral has taken its form. So this is beautiful, or something unique that the city offers us to see. And to be in Rio, one can never forget this beach. All of us should have known about it. It's the most craziest beach. It's the most splendid beach. It's more active. It invites a lot of visitors during New Year's Eve. So we have heard this name many times, Copacabana. But more than the beach itself, the entire landscape, the entire district, the entire neighborhood is so smooth, so pristine for someone to experience. The landscape here was designed by landscape architect Roberto Belmax, where he's created a beautiful environment inspired from the movements of sand, movements of water. So you can see the black and the white stones that are alternating with each other in form of a kind of dynamic movement inspired from nature itself. And you can see a wide passage. So from the beach till the buildings, you can see a wide range of a streetscape, right from the shore to the white sands, to this walkway, to the main road, to the parking zone and the bus transit zone. Then you have the edge that is lined by tall buildings, and the tall buildings are nothing but hotels where tourists can stay. And one of the expensive hotels in Brazil, or almost in South America, the Copacabana Hotel, where Michael Jackson and Princess Diana stayed, is also right in front of the sea. So this is one beautiful thing, not only in terms of a beach, but also in terms of landscape architecture that one can experience about. And you can never forget this. The masterpiece that was created by artist George Celeron, where this is termed as Escadaria Celeron. But before that, the artist had been to this district of Lapa. So now I had just shown you what the contemporary or what good things are there in Rio. But equally, when I started looking, this was the main essence of my workshop that I visited. So I'll just show you in the next slides. But before that, the main essence of the place, an artist took up an initiative to regain confidence inside the slums. So he wanted to rework with the community to create a grand staircase. There were 215 staircases in total. And the artist started to create different patterns with greens, blues, and yellows. But all the residents mocked at him because it was so naive. The colors that were chosen by him was green, blue, and yellow. That is a basic representation of a Brazilian flag. So all the residents mocked at him. Then he got an idea to take around inspiration from all the countries, and he gathered around 2000 varieties of tiles from 60 plus countries to make this grand artistic masterpiece. So you can also see inspirations from India over here. So a lot of different countries' culture has been taken and embedded here, and this is one must-visit place in Rio de Janeiro if anyone goes. So coming to the most interesting part, Rio is very famous. How Rio is famous for beaches, buildings, modernism. Rio is also famous for its slums. It is called as favelas, and this was the main reason I was there. So we were so fortunate to get an image of a favela tenement. So you could see the living conditions of people inside a favela, where it is just a small tenement of maximum of 70 square feet. You can see a small window over there for ventilation purpose. You can see a wall to store that lady's family pictures. You can see a small TV, a fan, a chair to read newspapers, and a bed to sleep. That's it. This is what the lady has to get herself inside the tenement. And they have only open latrines and open kitchens. So once you come out of the house, you have everything on the street to be done. So this, when I look at this picture, I just get back nostalgic to my experience in Mumbai. So Mumbai has a different landscape when you enter into Dharavi and when you exit into some districts like Vileparle. So you have different contrasts in city, right? So this is one such contrast that was beautifully explored. Rio has a lot of mountains. So cascading from this place, you could see the favela stepping down, and you can see a group of modernist apartment buildings and commercial buildings that is forming in between the valley of two mountains. Then you can see some water bodies. You can see a lagoon. You can see vast expanse of waters. Then you go with some mid-rise buildings, and finally it is capped with the Sugarloaf Mountain, which is another interesting tourist spot in Brazil. So this reminds me of my experience in Mumbai as well. A city offers a lot of contrast for its residents. You have on one side of a coin, and the other side is the other side of a coin. So two different contrasts was explored. And then we went to this place called as Recife, which is in the northeastern part of Brazil. That was the actual place where we were assigned to work on a slum. And the slum was called as Coque. So inside the slum, you get this beautiful experience. This is again a streetscape, like how I showed in the previous slides, the streetscapes that were so beautiful. This is the streetscape that these residents have. So what can be done more to improve the living conditions of these people inside the favelas? What can be done more to improve their health, improve their lifestyle was the question. So we worked in this. So these were some of the temporary settlements that were about to get demolished and get reconstructed. So the policy and the program that we were working on was called as Minha Casa, Minha Vida. So my house, my life. So this was a federal housing program that was started in around early 2007, and in between 2009 to 13, the 2009 to 16, there were estimated 7 million houses to be built, and out of which 2 million houses were already built. And all the houses that were built were basically like this. It's a group of house, and only house. So what the federal government started to realize, if we just build housing for the community, what more is there? How can we create diverse environments was the question that was pondering over them. So that is when the workshop was invited, and a lot of different architectural schools were invited to look upon to develop the environments. And all these are basically focusing towards low rise, single-story buildings and low density. So how could we get high-density buildings were again thought of. So some of the slides that I am showing you is part of the workshop that we did. So the workshop slides. So this was the main area or the settlement of study in the center, which is flanked by water bodies on either side. So the water bodies are nothing but the Kokebaribe River and Ipabaribe River. So there were two rivers like our Nile, like our fertile civilizations. So these also has the opportunity of waters to be tapped on. So the strategies that we were working on and looking forward for densification, and densification cannot be done in a whole manner, right? It has to be done in phased manner. So the densification based on number of units, based on income groups were studied, and it was done in a phased manner. So that was one of the strategies that we used. And second, when we talk about waters, of course, the fabric, the urban fabric was more of fragmented. So what to create, how to create new connections so that the fragmentation should be broken. So that was the next strategy that as urban planning or as students of urban planning, we were looking at. So how to break the fragmentation, how to connect the different parts of urban fabric. And of course, when there is water, you need to define waterfront, right? So that was another strategy that was taken. And water is a source where even water taxis could be invented. So defining water edge. And the last strategy, of course, was housing typology. Working on different housing typologies, especially incremental in nature, so that it is also promoting densification of every neighborhood. So housing is just not a commodity; it is more than a shelter. So these were some of the after images that were done. So probably apartments started to coming up in many blocks of urban Brazil. This was what I showed you was just restricted to the city of Recife, but a lot of other cities like Rio, Salvador, even Sao Paulo, a lot of other cities also practice the same in the federal housing policy. The picture towards the right also shows what interest. So it is Brazil is almost like our Indian context. There is a lot of things that are going on within the community. So this is one good example of how the community itself revitalize the space. You can see the top image which was before and the bottom image which is after. So it is a completely self-initiative by the community itself to revitalize and relook at the area they live in. So this also proves that a government or a city council need not involve in creating places like this. You can create wonders by yourself. The responsibility is within the citizens. And some of the outcomes at Recife were high density blocks that came after. These were, and a mixed use typology was created to involve EWS, LIG, MIG, and some HIG housings were also built to cross subsidize what was lost. So there were unique things that were invented, and the density also went up. And one such projects also offers some recreational amenity for the Brazilian kids. So they had some parks within the space so that they also have a source of active recreation. And the last experience I want to show today is about the LLDC experience. This is more close to my heart. Though London has a lot of things to offer us. Many people should have been to London as well. So it has a lot of things to offer us. But something close to my heart was the London Legacy Development Corporation experience. So at the end of Olympics 2012, so London had a major pressure to revitalize its eastern area. So now the Olympics is over. What will happen to the area next was the question. So this was the area after Olympics where a lot of things were only the stadiums were built. Nothing around it were developed. So the major question was how this could be developed. So this was the a major reason why the London Legacy Development Corporation was initiated. And the major thing that was done is to densify this area, to create more housing, to create more retail, and to create a more diverse neighborhood. So this was the proposal finally given by the corporation to revitalize the river, to create more urban districts that are more intact, to invite an institution to take part so that there is an institutional growth inside, more artistic community to be developed, and the stadiums were retained so the stadiums can be used as stadiums itself. So the remaining part of the community was developed. And this was the Lee River, a source of water that runs across the neighborhood. So this was completely revitalized as a source of passive recreation, maybe a heart for these part of the people to have picnicking, bird watching. So all these kinds of passive recreation was done. So even today, the neighborhood of Stratford has a lot of implications, a lot of new interventions that has been done in this past 7 years. So again, master planning is a project that is not done in a go. It is done in phases. So of course, the city has a lot to offer. So in the past 7 years, there is a drastic change in these neighborhoods as such. So one of the neighborhoods that that I was willing to show you was the Hackney Way. So this is a more of a low dense artistic neighborhood. You can see graffiti like this everywhere. Everywhere around these districts, you can see only artworks by street artists. So it's a more thriving artistic community that was existing. So this was the proposed redevelopment in the form of model. You can see the water running in between, and they were kind of creating a mid-density, mid-rise and mid-density kind of environment, which hosted a more combination or collage of workspaces and living spaces. So the strategy that was used was first revisiting the yard spaces in the cluster. There were a lot of open spaces in between the buildings in the neighborhood that were not put to use correctly. So a good example is this picture where you could see an open space which is of no use. You can see a lot of artworks in and around, but the yard is not used as such. So to make use of this yard was one of the strategies. Next was using the water source to define an edge. Of course, whenever there is a water edge, everyone has to understand, the citizen has to get to the water to get the reality or get a feel of it. So the canal edge was treated. So now later, after the treatment, you have a lot of active rental spaces like cafes that have come up. It is more sparkling now. It's more active. It's more activated next to the water. Imagine how pleasant it would be to sit next to a water and have a cup of coffee. So it's more exciting to have. So this is how it has regained its more lost importance. And one more important thing was connecting different yards in the form of spine, so that none of these open spaces work independently. Everything is a coherent way. Everything is clustered together and work as a whole. Though it functions differently, it is as a whole. So this was one open space that was revisited, and it was taken up by a rental space. And you can see a lot of sustainable ways of using it. You can see barrels that were used. All the old and unused wood are being used as furniture. So this is how this part of artistic community has taken back its existence. Nothing is new. So existing structures have been remodified and revitalized to put to new use. And these were some of the proposals of medium density and co-working spaces. So living was introduced next to stations. Of course, when a station is redeveloping, more people want to live close to railway stations. So you can see a lot of co-working and living spaces. And also the traditional London loft structures and the heights were restricted so that the housing policies were adhered to. So these were some of the pictures. Towards the right bottom is the new Hackney Wick station, the redevelopment that happened. And towards the left bottom is the cafe space that was recreated. And towards the top is a place where co-working spaces. And a lot of people were encouraged to use this space because the rental was a bit low. So compared to the central or West London, the rental spaces over here for co-working and many things were low. So people can actually afford it. So this was the way how master plan involved a lot of people to come actively use it by reducing or subsidizing the costs involved. So many people actually start to use it. And finally, what was the end resultant was a buzzing mixed use and a dignified community, and along with a kind of a revamp that was done to the station. So the old station was a bit renovated to get a new and contemporary look, but still the artistic community is thriving. So that's what was basically done with the LLDC, and still works are going on. Still, every city is improving. Every city has its own challenges. So they have different ways of tackling their own challenges. So looking at this, so what I had understood is my travel has increased my love for cities. So through my travel experience, I had understood that every city has a lot of things to offer. Maybe many people actually travel in terms of religious. They have religious travels. People travel for work. People travel for culture. People travel for business. People travel for leisure. So all these are integral part of the city. Every city has its own challenges. Every country has a lot of things to offer. So my travel increased my love for cities. So we started to focus on educating people through travel experience. And as a result of that, we ended up starting this organization of UrbLab, where it is an organization that caters and gives experience to city, the experience of cities to kids, adolescents, adults, and through institutions and other forums. So we make people experience the city through our lens. We give them a complete experience of cities, what a city offers you in terms of religion, in terms of culture, in terms of cuisine, in terms of architecture, and in terms of urban environments. And we've done over 15 tours since 2017 with architectural institutions, schools, foreign nationals, and many individual travel lovers. Our trips also focus on learning and experiencing culture, architecture, and urban environments. And of course, having a practice, my travel has also increased our commitment towards the community. Especially when I had a great impact when I visited architect Alessandro Aravena or Alfredo Brillenberg, where most, and especially my South American experience has given me a lot of focus towards what as architects we could, or how architects could be socially responsible. So we started to focus on socially responsible projects, yet running our practice on one side. So some of our research and practices I would like to show are as follows. So this is one of our pilot projects. The first one built as a community center, where we tried to create a low-cost module, an octagonal structure just in front of a panchayat tree. So where we involved the entire community to work, and we made them build their own multi-purpose center. So it's more interesting to involve and engage the community. All these takeaways are from my travel experience on how community participation was done in many projects. A lot of South American cities have this, and especially African and South American countries have this in practice. So involving the community in building their own structures. So this is one of our recent proposals. Again, we are working on a corporate social responsibility project. So this is a kind of stilted bamboo structure where we are focusing on creating a stilted structure in the ground that offers a more of a vertical garden type, and the top floor is a flexible environment that supports multi-purpose thing. So this is developed as an urban insert inside the slums or inside any deprived area, or maybe in a rural context. So we are starting to focus on creating prototypes to fit in urban and rural context as well. So this is one such prototype that we are working on. And this is again Bambi texture, what we call. So we are working on a completely floatable or a makeshift structure that is made of bamboo frames with tire foundations and bamboo mats, so that it creates a kind of a living condition for deprived people. So this is one more research that we are focusing and trying to build a prototype on. So completely made of bamboo frames or any other recycled material. This is one more proposal for a CSR project. This is more focusing on a learning environment in a rural area, where we are focusing on a closed and open learning. So as we understand, we move forward for ages. So we totally forgot what was open system of learning or a Gurukul system of learning. And as we progress, of course, we need computers and modern technologies as well. So this is a kind of rural center that fits both. So towards the left, a wall divides the open and closed areas. Towards the left, you could see a small box where you have computers and you have a closed learning environment. And towards your right is a tree where open learning could be. It is just shaded so that an open learning atmosphere could be created. So it's a kind of dialect between an open and closed learning that we're trying to propose. And of course, who can miss a container office structure? So we are also working on expandable container. So we believe that future of rental spaces will definitely depend on container architecture. Maybe not now, but maybe 5 or 10 years later. So shipping, there are so many, thousands and thousands of shipping containers that are left derelict, which are not put to use. So being responsible, we need to take into consideration. So we need to create prototypes on how different atmospheres can fit in. There are a lot of container structures around the world used for residential living, but looking at our context, people might not be willing to stay in urban areas in a container structure. So probably expandable container office structures might be the future of offices. So we are working on a focused research which has some of the advantages as well. It's modular, adaptable, and it's also flexible. So that was one thing. And one more proposal that we are working on is a kind of urban insert in a clover leaf structure. So we are taking a clover leaf junction. It's a kind of flyover residue that is the center of a clover leaf bridge, where the center areas can be used as a prototype in many areas. So we are taking this as a research context, and we are trying to work on an urban insert in clover leaves. So this is just a prototype model that we are working on, and all the four open areas in the clover leaf will give you different spaces. So in this context, we are showing an urban forest inside an area. We are showing a recreation area. We are showing a container space which can mitigate risk. So which is also for risk management and mitigation. So it can be used as an emergency shelter. And we are also planning to use a prototype of cyber parks or hyper parks, so that if there is any institution or if there is any learning environment close to it, people can actually use this residue space as a learning environment, like a cyber park, which is completely Wi-Fi enabled. So we are working on a focused prototype of a cloverleaf model. So these are some of the commitments. So through travel experience, we've got a lot of things that what many countries and many cultures and many people and many city governments work on. Through those takeaways, we are trying to make a small, even though all these are at a nail stage, probably these might be the need in the future. So things are eventually developing. So a lot of things the city can offer to us. So just to wrap up this entire thing, I would say traveling is more like a blank page. So it is more about what you write in it. So the way you want to experience the cities, you will have to craft it. So it is better you take travel as an experience rather just a hop in and hop off. So it will definitely teach you, it will create you more exposure. And of course, as architects, we are already integrated with the experience of traveling, but still you can make it more as a part of your life to experience a lot of things. You will definitely improve in terms of getting exposed to a lot of new things that are happening, and that too in a practical scale. So to conclude, I would say no place in this world is worthless. Every place or space has an inherent meaning to it. It will reveal depending on the way you see it. So I would like to thank MGI School of Architecture and all the teachers for having me here for this webinar. So I'll just close with this. So any questions you can just type out or you can just ask now.
Good afternoon, sir. Good evening, sir. This is Vilasini.
Yes,
From
Vilas.
Dr. MGR. Sir, I have this question. You showed us a picture where the open spaces, you said the open spaces regulations were followed, but were used on the building itself. Can you explain that further?
Okay, so as a part of housing policy, like how we have our CMDA, so they have housing standards to set in within the plot extent area. They need to leave 20% up to 20% of open space.
Okay.
So which means that you can either leave it in form of a courtyard or you can leave it in the form of a setback. Some open space should be there. So this architect wanted to leave an open space in the elevation of the building. So he just exactly cut that elevation front, approximating to 20% of the area, and left it open. So that it still adheres to the housing policy. What they say is 20% area, right? Up to 20% area. So they've just cut that elevation area to match that policy.
Thank you so much, Karthi. It was wonderful and indeed an enlightening session, giving us the relevance of travel and architecture, showing us the different experiences of cities in your perspective, and showing us a lot of travel pictures through your lens, highlighting the importance of social housing, heritage, and the climate-based settlement, and also some topics covering about human interaction through built environment, and showing us some of your CSR projects through your pictures. So definitely, I think this will urge all the young architects to definitely experience this more. And you also showed us how traveling opens doors to timeless architecture, getting to see how life is lived outside of our own little bubbles, which we are created now. So thank you so much for spending your time. And there are a few more questions in the chat box. I'll just quickly read out the question. Maybe you can just answer those questions alone.
Sure. Can you just read it out?
1 minute. Yeah, just a minute. Yeah. What's the experience of travel in architecture? How this has impact on urban planning?
I didn't get you. Can you come again?
What is the experience of travel in architecture and how this has an impact on urban planning?
Okay, so of course, when you travel to many cities, right? So every city has to offer you an urban environment. So many cities have grown, may it be historic in nature or planned in nature. Everything has a set of rules or standards to follow. So every activity that happens in a city is part of a city growing, which means it is part of an urban environment, urban planning strategy, or a master planning strategy. If it is a new town, a new master plan is led, or if it is an old town, there are few interventions that are being made to readapt and reinvent the city. Like, say for example, Hafen city in Hamburg has a beautiful way of treating its old port area. So though it is a city of its own, it has a heritage of its own. They have recreated through urban planning a new district that offers a lot more to the city and the tourists. So every city in such fact has a lot of things that are happening in terms of planning and policy. When you start traveling, you will definitely experience this through. I mean, when you go to a new city, you will have to experience this planning. All these planning measures are measured by the practical implementation of it. So the projects that are being implemented, there are a lot of scales of projects that are being done. A community, it might vary from a small community building to a public space to a transportation sector, because urban planning is so huge. The umbrella is so huge. There are a lot of things that are attributed to it. So when we start at least understanding one part in a practical aspect, that can be made only through travel. Over these years, a lot of countries have made urban planning interventions. So those can actually be done. The urban planning interventions are done by a lot of practicing architects, or maybe by the city governments through architects. So this can be experienced to travel. The only thing you need to do is to do a research before you go to a city, so that you can understand what you're going to look at.
Okay. And there's a next question from one of the participants. They would like to understand that there is a population constraint if we compare any European country to us, like Amsterdam. They wanted to know if you agree, and does it affect the policies at urban level also?
Definitely, it affects the policies, because we cannot compare ourselves, a country like us, to any European country, because maybe we are 100 times more in population than them. Because Amsterdam is Netherlands is a country with a population of hardly, may say 1.5 to 1.8 crores, and we are even more, far more. We are around 120 or 130 crores. So the numbers are more. So obviously, at an urban scale, the policies cannot be taken and placed here. So the only thing is, say for example, the policies in South America are more relevant here, but though the population scale is so different, the context of people, the context we are talking about, the demand that the country has, are almost in an equal level. So it all depends on what we can learn from which country and readapt it for our own selves. Nothing can be taken and placed here. So all we need to understand is how they have tackled their problem and how we can give our own solution. So nothing can be taken. Of course, the scale varies. Of course, the countries are totally different.
Okay. And there's one more question. Will you help in pointing out any 3 or 5 architectural wonders or settlements out of so many existing in the world today, which we as architects and academicians can take inspiration from and also help in molding our students?
Of course, when you take about the quick things that come to my mind is what I have inspired from is the vertical gym in Venezuela. So the architectural firm think tank run by Alfredo Brillenberg has done a beautiful intervention in the as an urban insert. It's called Vertical Gym in Caracas. So that is a beautiful thing that can be seen. And in terms of nature, in terms of history, Machu Picchu is one beautiful thing that one can actually go and see. And Pamukkale in Turkey is a beautiful natural wonder. So it's a district of Pamukkale in Turkey is a beautiful thing to again see. Hagia Sophia in Istanbul is a beautiful historic wonder for architects to look out. And in terms of urban planning, especially the waterfronts in Sydney, waterfronts in Melbourne are a beautiful thing to study. Germany has a lot of things to, especially the Hafen city has a lot of things to get inspired in terms of master planning and campus planning. When you take the Randstad, that is Rotterdam and Amsterdam, you have there is a district called as Almere, which has good neighborhood planning done over there. So that is a beautiful thing, including the buildings. So from the buildings to an urban scale, Almere has a lot of things to study. In terms of architecture, Seattle Public Library is a beautiful building for architects to take as a case study and do. So these are few things that came to my mind, but there are of course a lot more.
Okay. One more question. Inputs for the revitalization of water bodies, which you said from Amsterdam, is it applicable to Chennai?
Definitely not, because see, Amsterdam had clean waters. So their strategy was not to clean something and redo it. But a city called as Utrecht has done it. What was a previous highway? It was actually a canal that was made into a highway, but they redid the same thing and got the waters back. So that was done over there. But in our context, in Chennai especially, we cannot use the same strategy. So first, in terms of, we need to take care in terms of inundation. We need to treat the water edge, and of course, we need to clear up the water, and then waterfront is possible. And of course, it already India is taking up steps. A lot of cities, especially the Sabarmati waterfront, is a good example and initiative. The Ganges is another initiative. So there are a lot of waterfronts that are coming up, but it takes some more time for the entire thing to get revitalized. But still, there is a scope of defining water edge, especially for our city.
Okay. There's one more question. Traveling and experience from traveling gives a better understanding, but how the inference could be more relevant to the international standards or to a micro level while we are designing?
Okay, so it is basically on how you perceive it. So as architects and as, as creative person, the inferences we take away, our perceptions are totally different. So taking it to a micro level is based on what you perceive from it. Say one of the image that I showed you inside the campus of Amsterdam, where I showed a small section of the water in between the building and the street. So that is a small micro level intervention that the architect of the Central University of Amsterdam has inferred. So similarly, the inference can be at the inference is what you perceive. So anything from what you travel can be inferred and perceived. Your perception depends on what you can use at a micro level.
One more question. The presentation which you had showed between the first two cities, which you have discussed, has some life in it, and they also could see the vibrancy and could feel it. But in the present scenario, smart city concepts are coming up. What, according to you, makes a city smart? And will smart cities improve people's life?
Okay, smart cities are smart. Of course, with technology, it is definitely smart. But more than technology, if we start to achieve social sustainability, economic sustainability, and green sustainability in terms of green, when all these things cover under one roof, then probably the cities are smart. When say a small example for any layman to understand is, when you go to any city, you have a smart card. That smart card allows you to travel or take any public transportation. You can use the card to use in a bus, you can use it in a train. So when everything is integrated, it's smart. So of course, technology makes it smart, but more than technology, if the sustainability is achieved in terms of social level, economic level, and of course at a greener level, then probably the cities will definitely it will be a smart city.
Okay, and there's one more question. You told about urban tours you and your team are arranging. Can you tell more about it?
I didn't get you. Can you repeat it?
You've explained us about the urban tours, you and your entire team, where you are arranging about the urban tours. Can you talk more about it?
Okay, so it is more about experiencing cities with the institutions, because a lot of people travel. So especially when it should be an educational environment, so we focus on taking people whoever enroll with us on experiencing that city. Say for example, if we are taking you to a city, we will make you experience all modes of transportation, especially public transportation, to show you what the city is about. We will make you understand what the travel lines in the city are. We will make you understand what the important buildings in the city is about. We will give you a brief glimpse about what city planning is. We will take you to the historic, if any, in that city opted for. If there are any historic architectural marvels, we will take you through the cuisine experience of that city and anything else that is unique about that particular city. So this is what we talk about experience. When you go to a country or a city, the experience, what you feel, is what you need to take away from that tour. So that is what we are organizing.
Okay, and 1 minute. I think, how do you think Adyar River be developed as an architect, your perspective, with your travel experience?
There is, of course, Adyar River has a lot of, it has immense potential to work on it. And a lot of architects are giving the students of architectural fraternity, and a lot of architects over here are also taking initiatives to give proposals. There are a lot of urban labs over here looking to focus on redeveloping it. But the initiative has to be either top down. There are two initiatives that are taken at an urban level. One is a top down approach, that is initiative from the central government to the state government to the public, or a bottom up approach, that is from a group of citizens led by some NGO or a non-profit organization, or some stakeholders. Someone has to invest in it. So only research ideas cannot come to reality. Someone needs to take up the initiative to actually work on it and do it. So that initiative, either it comes from the top level or the bottom level, will actually give a spark to that. So of course, our water resource in Chennai has a lot of potential in terms of water transportation, especially because it traverses through different districts and it takes you up to 50 to 60 kilometers out of the city. So it has immense potential for itself to regain its original identity, but we don't know where the spark comes from. So either it should be from the top level or the bottom level. So it has potential to be redone. So any more questions?
Karthi, yes, actually we are running short of time now. Actually, there are more questions poured in the chat box. What I'll do, I'll collect all the questions and
Okay.
I will send you as a mail. We can reply them individually.
Fine. Anyway, I've just given my email ID.
Yeah,
So
yeah. People can note down the email ID and the contact. But
So
on behalf of Faculty of Architecture, Dr. MGR University, I would like to thank all the participants for your cooperation and spending your valuable time during this pandemic period. Looking forward to reconnect with you all again for the upcoming sessions. And thank you very much, Karthik, for spending your valuable time for us. It was a wonderful presentation discussing about the different perspectives according to your travel experiences. Thanks a lot for accepting our invitation. On behalf of Faculty of Architecture, I would like to thank you personally.
Thank you. The school dean, HOD, and of course all the teachers who organized this. And I thank all the participants who over here who have taken their time to look at the presentation. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you, Karthi. Thank you.